Thank you so much, Kellie-Jay Keen Cumming. You're founder of Standing for Women and a range of other things. So I have a couple of questions, and it's possible that you might have things you want to say as well anyway, or questions that have come up that you've seen. But I'll get started with a question I'm really interested in, and a couple of other women have asked me, is when did you start getting involved in activism, and what piqued trans you? And thank you for coming as well.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for having me and all the incredible work you do around the world. 2015, it was when David Cameron won outright, and I, like many other women, were just astounded. Didn't really know what was going to happen. Thought that the end of the world was nigh. Little did we know where we'd be in 5 years' time, but it really did feel like a terrible loss for everybody. And I joined an online group called Awesome Lefty Women. In fact, I'd had a little bit of a brush with it, with this particular issue, where I genuinely thought that trans women, or so-called transgender women, were very vulnerable, disturbed, quiet men who just wanted to stay at home, and they were all transsexuals. And so I had a little brush with that and probably got very much the wrong end of the stick. And so 2015, joined an online forum, and then that was the first introduction I really had with women being silenced, not being allowed to ask questions, and so on. And it was just quite peculiar. And so I peaked rapidly.
Yeah. And so what, and was that, at that time you were involved in it was a sort of lefty women thing. And then how did you develop your ideas about activism, things like making T-shirts, Standing for Women, your Speakers Corner events, and then now your YouTube channel? How did that sort of progress? Where did your ideas come from?
I joined a group. It was then called Fair Play for Women, and it was started by, I think it was Cherry Austin had actually started Fair Play for Women, and it was an online, very secret group. And I joined it, and I don't know how many members. There's a couple of fallouts, regrouping of different web pages or Facebook pages, and we just all discussed, and it was all, everyone was quite happy to have discussions. And then the incredible Dr. Julia Long, she had a meeting in about 2016 that I couldn't make, called Thinking Differently. And then Venice Allen joined the group, and Venice was very much, well, why aren't we having public meetings? And she sort of came up with the first public meeting in Brighton, I think it was. And then the very next year...
Did you speak at that, Kellie-Jay?
I didn't. No, I didn't. I mean,
you weren't yet a speaker.
No, my kids were still at primary school. You know, I had 2 children at primary school. We just moved to a brand new area in 2015. I've got 4 children, and I really didn't have, you know, they very much had to come first. They were resettling into a new area. So I didn't really have any time. And then something happened to me by coincidence. A similar group, Women's Place UK, invited me to speak. And then I have no idea why they invited me, but they invited me to speak. And then they very publicly rescinded their invitation and made some quite despicable accusations against me that have really stuck. They've really stuck. I mean, they were very good accusations because they really have managed to follow me around the whole time. And so I wanted to continue to do something. I'd already been arrested. I'd already been interviewed under caution. So I wasn't, you know, and people were deciding that because by virtue of me not breaking, which I don't think many of us would, to be honest.
Sorry, why were you arrested? Some women, maybe a lot of women, won't know why you were arrested.
Okay, I do apologise. So I had been tweeting about the children's champion, Susie Green, and how it was child abuse to take her son to Thailand to be castrated. And Susie Green is the CEO of Mermaids. And if you followed the Kira Bell case at all, you will have come across Mermaids. They are advocates for reducing surgery ages for children who believe that they are trans. And I mean, it's everything that you imagine from an organization that is pro-trans in kids. And so I talked about her. I'd had to be interviewed under caution. I was, I think, the first woman on this side of the debate that was actually interviewed under caution. And so
were you terrified, or were you just, I mean, you've got such a thick skin now. Did you then think, oh, I'm going to be okay? Or were you really scared?
No, I haven't grown a thick skin. I kind of was born with it. Yeah. So no, I wasn't frightened. I guess there were moments where my husband was sort of a little bit worried about the implications it might have, and whether or not I would be charged with a crime. But in my mind, it was always that actually the worst thing that can happen is that it goes into open court and people really do understand what is happening. You know, that's always been my thing, that we always knew it would take a court case to really break the back of some of this stuff. And so I thought maybe it would be that. So it was a win-win, and, you know, it went in the Times, and maybe it did. It was a bit of a watershed moment for these things being discussed a little more openly. And then the thing with women's plates happened, and I wanted to continue because I'd begun to get a bit of a voice just because I'd been interviewed under caution. So, and I don't work, and I'm in a fortuitous position where the risks to my livelihood are not the same as anybody else's because I don't really have one. And so I decided that I wanted to continue, but it had to be, I sort of thought everyone was just going to loathe me after the Woman's Place episode, and that nobody would want to have anything to do with me. So whatever I did, it would have to be anonymous. And I came up with the T-shirts and the billboard and selling the T-shirts, and it was supposed to be anonymous.
Kelly, can you tell us about the T-shirts? How did you come up with, I mean, what happened? Were you just thinking one day, I know I'm going to make T-shirts? What process? Well,
I was chatting with my lovely friend Venice Allen, and I think Joni Walsh as well, and I just got to the point where we were like, well, what is it? You know, it needs to be something really innocuous. What is it? And then it was, well, the thing that's happening is the word woman. And so I thought, well, I'll phone the Times and see how much it costs to put an advert in the Times, and it was about 20,000. So it's way above my budget. And then I was thinking buses. And then I found out that billboards were like £700 for an unlit. And it didn't need to be a big campaign. It just needed to be big enough that it would irritate the trans activists. And so that's what we did. And put it up. And obviously they got really cross. And I think that's the first time I did get a little bit frightened, you know, that sort of moment where you do feel a pressure on your chest where you think, actually, this is really serious. When a company as large as Prime Location, is that what they're called? Prime Site, sorry. When a company like Prime Site decide that they will buckle to the whims of trans activists over their commercial gain of having £700 to sort of facilitate that advertising, when we know that they've advertised numerous things that are incredibly controversial. I think not long after my advert was taken down, there was sort of the Michael Jackson isn't a paedophile advertising. So that was really sinister. And I think that was one of the first times I thought, oh, actually, this is really serious. This is not a few trans activists on Twitter that are silencing women. This is genuinely happening on a really frightening level, where the cold, hard cash motivation of business is somewhat corrupted.
Yeah. Yes. So that's they're trying to silence you. And then so you're still doing the T-shirts, and which many of us have. Almost everybody who comes on. I mean, I've got one of your T-shirts, but I haven't worn it yet on this webinar. But lots of women are wearing one of your T-shirts, so they've got all over the world. But you also last year were doing the Speakers Corner event. Now, in terms of activism, why did you think of doing in the street sort of Speakers Corner events?
Well, I don't know how many meetings you've been to, but you know, you see the same faces.
I think I've been to 3 of them. I'm always in the background. Yeah. I'm right at the back.
I mean, I think you see the same faces, and actually if someone's prepared to come to a meeting, it probably means they're already agreeing with your arguments, and wanted to tap into new people. And if you haven't been to Speaker's Corner, there is a buzz about that place. It's predominantly occupied by men arguing about God, number one, but they are open to coming and heckling us, and it's a historic place. It's a place where real change has happened in the United Kingdom, but there's something about the live element of and very exciting about inviting lots of people to speak. You know, anybody. We've had anti-feminists stand on our platform, but the reason we decided to do it, and it's most of my things are collaborations with Venice Allen, and the reason we decided to do it is because what's happening, a bit like the woman thing, and the fundamental nuts and bolts, when you get down right to the core of the issue, is the word woman. When you get right down to the core of what's happening throughout social media, it's our voices, our public square. So we decided, well, if the tech giants are going to censor women's voices, and let's face it, they can censor the president of the United States, so they certainly have no hesitation in censoring all women if they so desire. It's sort of reintroducing this idea of reclaiming the public square one corner at a time, and hopefully when COVID is over, it will be something that can be picked up by anybody, anywhere, and just the joy and the buzz of being in a public space and engaging with other people is something I think is quite difficult to replicate in a hall or even on this amazing webinar, although obviously we can't reach around the world. But just having a conversation and saying something to somebody else's face and having the joy of the intonation and the proper interpersonal communication, I think, is something that is invaluable.
Yeah, and they are. I totally agree. And we've in my sort of small face-to-face group around where I live, we've been looking forward to doing some more on the street activities. And actually, I think that's where we sort of bonded around a couple of years ago around the Gender Recognition Act by going out on the street and handing out those postcards for the whatever the Fair Play for Women ones that we handed out, and had some really good conversations with people. So on the street activism seems, I would agree. Now, what about this huge YouTube channel that you have? When did you start that? And also, how do you have the energy to keep going? Because you do it almost every day, or like really often.
I really don't know where my energy comes from. I didn't realize I had quite so much. Maybe it's just having 4 children, then they're a little bit older, so I've got some spare energy. But I just like talking. I can really just talk off the cuff. So it's not like I do these grand plans. But what happened is I went to a feminist meeting in about 2018, and it was supposed to be the history of feminist activism. And it was one of the funniest, a little bit frightening because of where these people are in their thinking. But I then just came back and wanted just to I just ranted on a Facebook Live, and it went quite well. And before Facebook took it down, there were about 55,000 views in a matter of just a few days. And I thought, oh, perhaps I could do a little more of that. And so I just started a YouTube channel, and it's just gathered. And often I will just do it. I used to just do it ad hoc when something really annoyed me, which is relatively frequently. But now I've interviewed people, and I've made it quite regular. And it won't just be feminists or people interested in this issue. Often women complain that there are far too many men in the comments. But, you know, I think we are all on the precipice of living in a world where nobody can just A, talk to people that they don't agree with, and B, say things that might make them uncomfortable or unpopular. And so I'm more than happy to bridge that divide. And I think this is impacting all of us. It's not just women, although I do think, and Stella mentioned Free Speech Union and so on, there is a little lack of willingness amongst many of these organizations to recognize that the voices most silenced are women. We can't even say what we are without being silenced. And I do think women have to really sharpen their elbows and sometimes just remind men that we don't actually need them to speak for us. We are quite capable of speaking for ourselves. And hopefully that's what my YouTube channel does. Although,
yeah,
obviously.
So, Kellie-Jay, one thing I noticed is a couple of times I've been practicing on doing like live streaming on just practicing if we need to for these things. And anytime I've ever practiced, either on YouTube or on Facebook, quite a lot of people start watching just anyway. It seems like there's loads of us online all the time. So the moment if you have a few friends, the moment you go live, you get like 6 people watching anyway. I mean, and so I sort of think that's quite inspiring because it means any of us, all of us here, all women, can just have a little rant, and then there'll probably be about 6 people watching already. And the more of us who do it, the better. So that's one thing I've noticed. And I imagine it just happens with you that people like listening to you rant, and it's so it's great. But the other thing I think is that one of the reasons it's possible for us to have done these webinars is that we don't mind making mistakes. And we've actually made tons of mistakes. And that luckily, say in these webinars, the community of women who come to these webinars are really generous about the mistakes we make. And sometimes I've said wrong speech, and women have written to me afterwards saying, well, Jo, maybe if you phrased it in this slightly other way, that might be more positive. And I've thought about it and thought, yeah, great, I'll do that then. And it's been a really nice learning experience for me. But how about you about making mistakes? Are you fine with making mistakes? Or you know, you probably are because you've got quite thick skin. But what happens about that? Because you have to be able to live with that, don't you?
I've probably made loads. I've made some terrible mistakes. One of the worst things I did is go on a guy's YouTube channel who I didn't research properly. And I just looked at his content and his last few videos, and he'd made videos with a few people that I knew and liked. And I just thought he was a lefty. And in the little green room that you can have if you actually find the green room and you're not an absolute idiot like I am, is you have a little chat. And I just said to him, of course, we're both Nazis. And lo and behold, he actually was. So that was great. He must have thought, oh, you are one. How wonderful to find this woman coming on the channel who is also a Nazi. Look, I think if you talk a lot and you're willing to put yourself out there, you make mistakes. And if people can't forgive you for that, or they want to repeatedly bash you over the head with it, then so be it. I think it says more about them than it does about you. I do have I don't apologize very regularly unless I really, really mean it, unless my intention is to have done the thing that has caused people upset. I just think, look, I'm putting myself out there, and if you don't like what I do, then do something better. But I'm sure everybody who's ever heard of me is aware of the numerous horizontal attacks I've received over the last 2 years. I've spent a lot of time trying to work out what it is. You know, not that I'm this wonderful, likable person. I'm pretty sure I'm quite Marmite. But what people gain from even sort of throwing rocks at me, and what good it does for them if their motivation is like mine, to get to the end of this fight and damn well win it, and not capitulate to the whims of trans activists, and not allow more women and young women to be pulled into this cult or impacted by this cult. You know, girls where their fathers are transitioning and so on. And if that is your ultimate aim, then I do have serious questions for those people who routinely just personally attack me. So I know that we're all having very similar attacks on our liberties as women, but the United States is just about I mean, it's already on fire, but it's just about to go through a bit of a crisis, 2021, with Biden bringing through the Equality Act, as he will do, really quickly. So I just want to say to American women, you may well have grievances with organizations that are fighting against this, but the Women's Liberation Front have been doing some sterling work for a long time. And it's time just to put those grievances aside, because really you are at the point where the whole building is burning. And if you don't start putting these fires out and fighting back and holding the line for women and girls, I think all rights are going to be lost in a moment.